Okay, we are now recording. Thank you all. I say this just to make sure it's clear that everybody has agreed. There's someone entering the waiting room. Is someone else watching that kind of thing? Just because I won't be able to keep track of two things at once so well, or as well as if I have help. So yes, there was the please remind me to hit record. Thank you. That is now done. I am Eric Weber. I think probably all of you know me, but if not, I'll say just that I'm associate professor, as it says on my slides that I'm now going to share. Slides, it's a Word document. I just basically made what I would have made, which is a handout if we'd been meeting in person. So the main title here is Prepare to Act Naturally, because when you talk to people about stressful moments, they'll often say, well, be yourself, act naturally. There's truth to that, but there are things for which you can prepare. I also have a second title because there's really two parts to what I want to talk with you all about and see what you think about. And the other part is that when you go to conferences, people can be very focused on their purposes in a way that can seem Machiavellian, and I'll get to that. My suggestion is fairly simple: is be nice, not Machiavellian, in professional networking. And the face-to-face and online is just kind of going to be peppered in throughout the conversation. Also, next week, or I guess March 4th, whenever that happens. Yes, Thursday, March 4th at 7 p.m. We're going to have a book talk about the launch of my latest America's Public Philosopher. Dr. John Thielen, who's here now, is also going to offer some remarks, as will the Dean, Dr. Heilig, and also Katie Flynn, who wasn't able to be here today for this. It's going to read a passage. So I'm sorry, were there comments or questions? Okay, so go ahead.
You're not muted. We might ask everybody to mute unless they have a question to jump in.
Okay. Yeah, if anybody has a comment or a question, I see something in the chat. I'll hide. I see. Got it. No problem. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing here. All right. So it sounds like nonsense to say that you should prepare to act naturally, but at the end of the day, that is what I think you should do. And so we can just depend upon luck. You can. I think it's riskier, but of course, the harder I work, the luckier I get, is the line from Jefferson, or at least attributed to him, I think. We don't want to be too confident. We don't want to, just depend on luck or think that our networking efforts are going to particularly bear fruit. But you make yourself more likely to be lucky when you make efforts in this regard, is the way I think about it. And there are a couple of ways to think about networking professionally that I think make big differences. If you see networking as this awful task and as this gross kind of process, you might refer to places people go to interview as meat markets. That's how the major conference was in my field. It felt like a meat market. But you do have to think about acting naturally. You want to convey who you are, but you can prepare for that. So how does that make sense? So my suggestion is to think about it as playing an instrument. Not so much it basically as a performance. It's not so much something that you're acting, falsely. You shouldn't act falsely, I believe, but it is nevertheless a performance when you network with people. And we all get nervous about performances, and it can feel uncomfortable. But what makes someone seem so natural is rarely chance. It's much more likely some preparation. So we're going to talk about what we can do to prepare. At the same time, everybody can get nervous about this kind of stuff. Go ahead, Dr. Jensen.
Yeah, could you give a little context for what kind of settings we're talking about? Yep.
So that I think is going to be that's going to be established, I hope, in this next moment here about first steps in networking. So the way in which or the context in which you'll be networking will, of course, depend on your interests. As far as a guiding principle, though, I would say that it can be very useful to keep the following kinds of things in mind. Be active and be visible, right? When something comes up and people think of people for opportunities, you want them to think of you. That is one of the obvious benefits of networking. In addition, of course, you can help others, which is often not what people think of networking as being for, but the more you help others, my view is, the more you're helping achieve the goals you share with others, and thus you're advancing your own goals as well. There's also a book that's frankly not very good, but I like the advice. And the book is called Never Eat Alone. And I think that's overstated, but almost never eat alone. If you can, in other words, take opportunities to commune with others. That's usually, in religious language, taking communion or communing with others is often eating, frankly, with others, right? And so it's often the case at conferences that people go get a tray and they go sit alone at some event, right? Or you can sort of, grab something to eat and be chatting with people. And it's a matter of comfort, but how do we determine the context that matters? First of all, of course, what do you care about? So if you are, for instance, in administration and you're getting your degree to advance it within university settings, then you're much more likely to be at certain kinds of conferences or meetings than others, right? You may be more at a gathering of practitioners. You may be more interested in, let's say, student financial aid administrations, and there's an organization for that. So at the end of the day, you have to think about what you care about. What do you care about? What do you want to grow a network in with regard to, so on? Are you already connected to those networks? So, there are networks all existing in so many different areas and ways. And, you can think of those groups and networks that most closely appeal to your values as well as your aims, right? Are you a member of those networks? This kind of question was brought to my attention when I was in graduate school. How many of the graduate students who are here are members of professional networks or organizations? It's okay if not, that's part of the point of the meeting. Okay. For instance, if you are in evaluation, something that I'm not really in, right? I understand. So I was working on Sophia's Twitter account, and we have a great evaluation center. So I looked up Evaluation Association. There is the American Evaluation Association. Followed that organization, and then started following all the people who follow that organization. And by follow, in this case, I'm referring to Twitter, but you can do that on Facebook groups. There are listservs. And also, if there's an important organization, usually they have a very cheap, or at least a cheaper cost for membership than regular membership. They have a student membership level. So it can very often be a good idea. Sometimes it's free for students, and some groups just are free because they're really basically just networks online, right? And so my strong suggestion would be to start making those connections. Think about those different organizations. So I'm going to go ahead and ask my colleagues here, what professional organizations are you members of and benefit? Would you say that you benefit from? Not too many.
You caught me off guard.
It's okay.
The networks that I benefited from as a professional, or now, or when I was in grad school?
Either, both.
I think when I was in grad school, it was just jumping in to volunteer for everything at the anthropology meetings, which led to chairing a subcommittee, not as a grad student, but when I was first year as an assistant professor. So it just rolled right along. Now I just try to keep my head down and, avoid things.
I had seen that John had also unmuted, I mean.
Yep. I was a charter member of the Association for the Study of Higher Education.
Really?
Going back to 1976. I haven't aged since then. And another group that I belonged to even earlier, starting earlier, is the History of Education Society. And one thing that's worth keeping an eye on is the size of the association, in terms of what are the likelihood that you can talk to people, chat with people. So like History of Education Society is a very, very collegial group. The Association for the Study of Higher Education is very graduate student friendly. Graduate students have slots on the board, the editorial board, the program committee, or whatever. So those are two groups that I think that are pretty likely to be receptive to your joining and participation.
Thank you. I would say to everyone who's on the call who's unfamiliar with the acronyms we're seeing in the chat, like Dr. Johnson mentioned ASH and CIES and so forth, I would say copy the chat and look them up, because these are good and important organizations. And if you don't know what the acronym refers to, you can find out pretty quickly and easily usually. I see Chris's hand is up.
Hi, sorry I have to chime in like this. I'm multitasking. I'm doing this
Okay.
and walking from my Starbucks. So I'm not doing it right now, but because I relocated. But in the past, one of the great associations that you can actually get involved with in many ways is to join a political party.
Okay.
If you join a local political party, you know, they have like committees for everything.
True.
You know, environmentalism, supporting, you know, military veterans and their spouses, just anything you can think of. There's opportunity for outreach and community building. So they're a great association to develop within.
Very nice. And I see in the chat that Niaz has mentioned Human Development and Capabilities Association. That sounds like a cool group I didn't know about. Can you spell out TESOL for us?
Sure, yeah, that's teaching English to speakers of other languages. I'm an ESL teacher, and the Human Development and Capabilities Association is an organization that was founded by Martha Nussbaum and Amartya Sen.
Really?
And it focuses on their framework for capabilities in the field of development.
Fantastic. So we've already heard a little bit about a variety of organizations. We've heard about some of the opportunities people have taken advantage of. I think I remember Dr. Jensen mentioning committees, and others have mentioned committees. And so committee work is another example of ways in which you can get involved. And you can do a little digging about which organizations welcome graduate student participation and leadership in various ways. And even if you can't have certain positions until a little bit later, it could benefit you greatly early on in your career, depending on which next steps you make. So I also chaired the American Philosophical Association's Committee on Public Philosophy, and that was an outfit that was visible, and we were engaged, and we did things. I see Dr. Bradley's coming in. That's great. So, and also Dr. Waddington had mentioned a couple of groups.
John emails him and then he doesn't respond.
The Association for Education, Finance, and Policy, Association for Public Policy Analysis and Management, American Educational Research Association. Yeah, so any of you who, it's not that you have to go out and become members of all of these things, but look at them and then consider, if it costs money to be a member, then you know, reserve your judgment and judge your resources according to your situation. But some of them will either at least have cheap memberships, and some of them will be free. At the very least, what you can do is follow the pages of those organizations. Even if you're not going to become a member, if the cost is prohibitive, social media outlets are a great way people hear about everything and thus disseminate things. And therefore, following those pages should typically be free. And that can be great. But then again, some things you can't apply for unless you're a member. So watch out for that too. So, but anyway, that's already, we've gotten a lot of answers from people from a nice range of topics. And not all those organizations are necessarily research organizations, right? Some of them are going to be, like I mentioned, the Student Financial Aid Administrators Association. There's the one, the Teaching Second Language organization that Niaz mentioned. So there's basically professional organizations that aren't just research, of course. Full-time employees using EEP can apply for the EEAA award. Can you tell us what the acronyms, especially the EEAA, stand for?
Yeah, sorry, we're
That's
moving
great.
this weekend, so my life is chaotic.
Perfectly fine.
For grad students who are using the EEP program to pay tuition, can apply for the Employer Education Assistance Award. And I believe it was $250, and I got it last spring, and that helped me pay for, I ordered deduce for my qualitative research. But you could use it for anything. You just have to write, I think, a couple of essays and sort of explain what you want to use the money for.
Terrific. So this is telling us a little bit now, in addition, about kind of opportunities. So if you don't know, I mean, it seems to me you all are probably here because you value networking. But if anyone's kind of, oh, I don't know if I want to do X or Y or Z, think about the benefits. You know, getting to do committee work is a benefit, but it doesn't sound like one. Whereas getting money like Amy did can sound great. I will say the committee work can be highly rewarding. Can, I said. You're also, it's also visible for sure. Like if you're, you know, contributing to the field in a way that people see and value, that helps. And it turns out there's limited funding for registrations. That's terrific. So if there's, yeah, that gets to the point of cost, right? Fantastic. So again, at the end of the day, be visible. What does that mean? That means knowing about and attending events. It means presenting at them too. I'm going from my notes, apologies. It means attending them too, have ideas, express them, and genuinely seek to benefit from other people's perspectives on it. Some people see conferences as just dissemination, but it's also ways in which you gain tremendously from learning from other people's research, right? So all that said is sort of first steps in networking, getting to the context, what we're doing, what kind of organizations and so forth. Now let's, unless there, hold on, I can't see everybody with the way I have my screens. Are there thoughts or questions or comments we want to make at this point, or move on?
If you're working anywhere in education, it's advisable to be a member of whatever your immediate group is. In the international offices, we often have or share a membership of what we call NAFSA, which is the National Association of Foreign Student Advisors. Now, if you're dealing with anything to do with immigration regulations, you have to be in touch with stuff like that. And when I was working at UK, I was not only presenting at conferences, but I was on the advisory board for the software people, and then landed up on an advisory committee and working with CVIS themselves as they developed changes and updates, which meant that I knew exactly what was happening technologically, and met people who had my job in other universities, because there was nobody else who did mine here. And if you're an individual with a particular interest, you're very often not going to find it in your own department, or even in your own university, or in your own company you work for, or wherever you are. So sometimes you have to look for other people who can talk to you about, oh, we've both met this problem. Very
Excellent
helpful.
point.
Very
Excellent
helpful.
point. So my wife is on the administration, not the enemy, though, you know, we can reserve judgments about other administrators if you like. You know, she goes to conferences. They are often more of the kind of workshop conferences. Sometimes they'll have plenty of research in some panels, and other panels they'll talk about kind of what went well with certain programs at their university and so forth, which sometimes is scholarship, sometimes they don't think of it as such, but rather just, you know, they had a success or some kind of, you know, something to share, you know, to spread best practices kind of things. And so there's all kinds of ways, you know, you can participate in those. And as Anne is saying, absolutely right, there are very few people who can understand some of the challenges that she faced. And so one of the things she did is she reached out directly, not through Facebook, not through some organization, to particular people with similar responsibilities at other institutions. And then you can develop a listserv, and for free, you can have your own group going pretty easily with tools like Google Groups and other things. So if you can't find the group that you wish there were, you might be the one to craft it. So that's something to keep in mind. So let's see, as a K-12 teacher, I've maintained membership in Kappa Delta Pi. Now attended the conference. Great. Pre-service teacher, meaningful to share with the new teachers. Excellent. To note, many organizations are a space where practitioners and researchers get to connect and interact. Exactly right. I mean, you know, part of the point is to share knowledge and to hear, you know, insights from others, and to get feedback on your own projects. But also part of it is simply getting to know that group of people, because in any sphere, the more specific you get, the smaller is the world of that group, right? And so you can come to know people really quite well. The American Philosophical Association used to have something like 6,000 philosophers, which may not be nearly as big as some education conferences, but that's a good sizable number. And it was really surprising to me how many times I knew so many people when I'd go. But of course, that number would increase over time. So you're building this network with really a fairly small number of people. It's like a small town, but spread out. So how do you prepare for engagements? What does that mean? Of course, yes, some degree of acting naturally is something you want to do. But again, my metaphor was about music, right? The performers who play music naturally are people who know the notes, right? If it's a pre-written piece rather than, like, say, jazz, right? But you got to know you got to know your instrument, you got to know your notes, and you got to prepare for the performance. Now, performance, as I said, is not something false. It's not like you're acting like someone else, but rather making a musical performance is more how I would suggest we think about it. That we always have nerves about a performance, but you can prepare substantially in order that you may play naturally, right? You can't be yourself and natural without having what you need to perform naturally pretty solidly established. College of Ed has inactive Kappa Delta Pi. I actually co-chaired it in college. Very nice. So how do you prepare? What do you prepare for? As I say here online, you have time sometimes to think about what you have to say, to reformulate and craft, and then hit submit or post or whatever. But when you're in person, you rarely do. So what do you prepare for? Well, when you're going to some sort of gathering, eventually, by the way, we will be let out of our hovels. We'll be able to go travel again at some point soon, right? But eventually, we'll be traveling again. And even if you're not, even if you're going to an online conference like I went to last month, or actually, no, this month, excuse me. Nevertheless, you're getting together with people. There are sometimes little breakout sessions or coffee breaks, if you will. And, what are you going to talk to people about? What's going to come up? First of all, what do you want from your networking is a question. So, I strongly encourage people to think about asking themselves these questions. And early on, when I would find like advice pieces in the Chronicle of Higher Education, I would answer the questions for myself. And I felt so much more ready for when I was going to be answered them. And you will, and I'll ask everybody, what are things in networking situations or hiring situations that you've been asked that you wish you'd been ready for? That's sort of a fun question. But again, so what are you there for? First of all, it's often, if you're presenting, you want feedback on your project. You want people's thoughts. We often, again, treat presentations as dissemination, but you're also getting feedback from people. You're getting their thoughts about, well, have you considered doing it this way or whatever, and so forth. So that's useful. You can find collaborators, at these events. I realize I'm not sharing my screen now. Hold on. So you can find collaborators at these events. You will find journal editors or book acquisition editors or grant officers sometimes at these events. And so think about your purposes for a conference. The people with practice at this know this stuff, but when you're early on, I think it really helps to think these things through. Should you bring posters for the thing that you work on that's relevant to this society? I've seen great stuff from the Evaluation Center. I see you, Shannon. Hey. For instance, and I mentioned the American Evaluation Association earlier, but you're also there to learn about other people's work and study their programs. So therefore, you should study the conference program if we're talking about conferences. So these are all things that may be obvious to some, but I see a lot of people not doing some of these things. So think about who you'll meet. As I mentioned, editors. You'll meet a lot of people in your position who are students or faculty or administrators in certain positions. You'll find people who are hiring people like you, right? So part of the point of, at the same time, at the end of the day, I think the first and foremost point for networking should be essentially to develop friendships in your area. But there are benefits, right? So you do want to keep those kinds of things in mind. You want to think about, when people see your application, will they recognize your name? Or will they recognize at least the name of your institution, right? When I went on the market, Southern Illinois University basketball team was doing great. And believe it or not, that benefited me. People who may collaborate with you, I already mentioned, many people are in a similar boat. Okay, so let's move on. What do you want to tell people? Well, obviously about your work, you want to learn about their work. Look for those opportunities. Don't forget to think of things that are fun, right? Usually it should be related to what the network's about, but not always. I mean, you're making friends, right? And a lot of the time you can ask them, what have they done? How have they done certain things? It may sound, what's the word I'm looking for? It may sound self-serving to ask people advice because it makes them feel good, but people like to give advice because it does make them feel good to give advice. So I would use that. You know, I've asked a lot of people for advice about a lot of things over time. And a good example of a concreteness of that is that at conferences, people told me about publishing a book. I'm like, how do you do that, right? And they would share their book proposals with me that were successful, that they sent to this particular press, right? So, and you know, sometimes like in a grant, you got to, you know, hide certain information from people. It's private, whatever. But you know, people will share with you successful grant applications minus this private part, right? You know, and so you can really learn a ton from people seeing their successful plans, proposals, and what have you. Think about what people will ask you. So here's where I want to come to colleagues or everyone. What are surprising or funny or just common things people will ask when you're networking? Will ask you. I ask this because the question is, what should you be ready for? The obvious one you see here is oh, well, you don't see it. Hold on, you will. The obvious one is like, what do you do? What are you studying? You know, what's your master's thesis or what's your dissertation? And they don't want 5 minutes. Nobody wants 5 minutes. And this may be familiar to a lot of you. The elevator pitch is what you want to prepare. You get into an elevator, someone else is there, is interested in what you're doing. They're going to a panel and they ask you, what's your dissertation on? Before you get off the elevator, you need to finish answering. And when they ask you outside of the elevator, you should answer the same way, right? So that takes preparation and it's not easy to answer. And you can say, I'm not there yet, right? You know, that's fine. But go ahead.
We talk about this in field studies that it's, I call it the church steps version.
Aha, I like it.
Leaving church and the minister's hand is, that you're shaking hands with the minister and you've got grandma behind you and she wants to get to Sunday supper and you've got to get that answer out. How you doing? What are you working on? And before the rest of the congregation comes and just overwhelms you. The equivalent one is the cocktail party version.
I like it.
Asked you, but they really, really, really need to go to the bathroom. And there you are answering, and you have to answer in such a speed as to allow the person to get away from the room and not think of you as a complete bore.
Yeah, and Eric, Dr. Waddington and I both use the same book to teach the manuscript writing class, but there is a really good activity in there specific to this that we might want to just pull out as a department and maybe put as a resource in some of Dr. Jensen's materials. That's something else. It really says, I think you're right. You have to prepare and practice. You literally have to practice. Grab a friend, have them ask the question and do it, and stop your friend. If you're the friend, stop them when they start going down the wrong path. Like, you have to work through it.
It takes practice.
Yeah, Joe, I know Joe's on here. I might get with Joe and see if we can just pull that out, because I think that would be a really good resource to share what you're saying. Awesome.
That sounds terrific. And everybody, if you haven't followed the chat, Dr. Bradley also added a number of great organizations. Check those out. Niaz mentioned the Ohio Valley Philosophy of Education Society, which is a little closer to us than the Southeastern one, but both of them are relevant to us. And yes, studying the conference programs. People do love to be asked about their projects. So if you're interested in something on the program, go up to that person. Let's say you can't make their panel because you've got a conflict. Well, get coffee with them later. Even if it's an online meeting, you know, you can say, hey, would you be comfortable with, 15-30-minute conversation about your talk sometime, because I study this area too. I'm really interested. Yeah, so we'll get that from Dr. Bradley and share that. At the very least, I'll include that afterwards when I put out this video online. So go ahead, Dr. Thielen.
Sometimes one of the loneliest groups at a conference are the representatives of publishing houses and journals, and there often can be a lull where no one's talking to them, and so take an interest in the titles they're publishing. Ask, and sometimes with the publisher reps or editors, they're always on the lookout for people to like review book proposals, or journal editors need book reviewers. And so that if you have some genuine interest in the topics they're dealing with, let them know, and let them know that you would be available and interested in some kind of assignment like that.
Do you mind if I pick up on that point? Dr. Dillon is
all.
absolutely right that journals are absolutely looking for that. And I just finished one for Cornell University Press, and it's a great opportunity to stay abreast in your field. So great point.
And when publishers need reviewers, occasionally they pay you, or at least give you an equivalent value in books. So that could be nice. One more thing about what Dr. Thielen mentioned was that all of you have noticed academic books can cost $100, $200, $300 sometimes, depending on what we're talking about. Because the point is that the market is small, and it's primarily libraries at institutions, right? But nevertheless, you can get a free copy of the book, usually from the publisher. These days, they're starting to move to sending you a digital version, which I don't quite like as much as the physical version, but I get it. Anyway, but that $95 book that you wouldn't buy, but you'd get from the library, you can get them to give you a copy if you say, here's the journal that is interested in publishing this review. And then I have come to be befriended by someone I wrote a book review about his book. And writing a review can be a way to network, right? It gets your name out there. Harvard University Press has my name on their site somewhere because I reviewed one of their books and they put the blurb in there. It doesn't mean all that much about me, but it's, you're getting your name out there. You're when someone sees that book and you're interested in that subject matter, your name and your review might be on the back of the book in the next edition, right? That can happen. So it doesn't exactly get you a job, but it's part of networking in the background. There are some things we're going to get to where there are matters to be careful about, but we'll get to that in a next section. Things that you'll be asked about. What courses are you teaching if you're in a teaching position? What are you working on? Could you send me something on that? So if you're working on something, getting your sort of package of materials that you could share with people ready. I put the word in my document. I put the word apprécie, which is a French word, essentially meaning a short initial thing, right? So something like a short statement on what you're working on can be really smart to have ready, especially if you're going on the market. And how do you like it is a question you get asked about, like where you are. And in general, I try to sort of stay on the positive side, but I totally understand if someone is reluctant about that. However, think about what kind of colleague the respondent might want, or what kind of colleague do you want? When things aren't great, how does someone talk about their situation? I'm happy to say I'm in a very happy situation, but if you're not thrilled about something, find ways to be a good colleague about the matter when you talk to people about those things, is my suggestion. So also, when you're going to network, how will people find you? Is this, let me go back to my notes here. Share. How will people find you later? Poll the graduate students. How many of y'all have a business card? It is not absolutely essential anymore to have a business card. However, you can go to vistaprint.com and for $15, you can get 100 made for you and shipped to you. It's free shipping. I used Vistaprint way back when it was free to get the cards, but you had to pay $7 shipping. So it's a little more expensive now, but basically they put their logo on the back of your card. I didn't care. The front of the card looked nice. That's what mattered. Anyway, you don't have to go with them. There's all kinds of companies, but the point is it can be really useful to have a business card. And so how will people find you later? They've got your business card in their pocket, right? Having a web presence is the next thing on my list. Think about, search your own name. What do you want it to look like when people find you? I was just this week, working on a grant proposal for a potential conference, fingers crossed. And there were some people we were thinking about including in our intentions to invite to this conference. For the life of me, I could not find contact information for two of the people. And so are they going to be included? If you can't be found easily, well, how easy is it to network with you? I don't mean you have to have your own web page. My wife Annie is not exactly an extrovert. She's much more of an introvert, and yet she had a simple but clear and impressive LinkedIn page. And that page allowed people to get your contact information, right? You want people to see you and to be able to reach you. There's some stuff in the chat here. Social exchange connection. Be able to read the card without glasses. I like that one a lot, especially since people who will be hiring you are probably have worse eyes than you do.
The reason for that, Eric, is like our university, the University of Kentucky logo is the way that they have it situated, that if you have a name like I do, Jane McEldowney Jensen, and I use all of it in honor of my maternal forebears, it doesn't fit. I mean, it's the print is so tiny, and I noticed that people at professional events, when I used to try to use it, they hated it. It's better to have just your name and your email or your website and just that, so that it all fits and it's really big, so people can glance down at it and then continue the conversation with you.
I think that's a terrific point. The big picture at the end of the day, if someone's looking at your card and they can't read it, that's a problem. Right. And it's, of course, also a matter of accessibility, how much you're thinking about people who with worse vision. Right. So you're showing yourself to be thoughtful when you make sure your card can be read. Social networking is critical. Absolutely. Great way to network before going to conference. I often announce that you're going. Absolutely. That's very smart. And people will start scheduling, hey, can we get coffee? Right. Because you made your announcement. Absolutely. And I'm going to talk more about that. But in getting to web presence, it can be very simple. It can be as elaborate as you want it to be within reason. But my strong suggestion is that you get a great photo. This may sound mundane or brandish or commercialism, whatever. If you have a look at on this call, Joseph Barry is on LinkedIn with a beautiful photograph. It makes a difference. Can people put a face to a name is basically the point. And then you got to ask yourself, what do you want it to look like? I would strongly suggest you not do one of those photos where you only see half of someone's face. Those are pretty counterproductive. But yes, social media is my next point. You don't have to be on all social media, but I think you're missing opportunities if you're not on some. Because those organizations have pages on those places, and sometimes they only post certain things there. I also say maybe I'm looking at my notes, but I'm not showing them to you. Sorry. I also say maybe your CV. I will say the reason I say maybe is because when you're applying to very different kinds of jobs, sometimes it can be a really good idea to not have your CV online if it's very particularly, say, for an academic position, but you're also considering a staff position. You may not want to have your Vita online during that period. Outside of that period, I'd say try and make your Vita as generally relevant as possible. But this is Eric Weber's personal opinion. But again, at the end of the day, you want people to be able to find you is the key. Yes, and when you're hearing a talk, you may have seen it. Let me go ahead and share one more time. In case you missed it, connect with people on social media. That's what I do right here at the top is, connect with me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and my email address is here. If you're not connected with me in these places, you could be if you wish. You don't have to, but that's making it easy for people to find you, right? Ask people for their cards, email addresses, and so on. Now, this is something I haven't always done, but I think is a great practice. When I do, I feel good about it. Bringing a one-sheet statement on your presentation if you gave one, right? In other words, people don't need the whole paper. If they want the whole paper, you'll email it to them. But give them a sheet that has some summary points and your contact information. And I have been impressed later by a lot of things like that I've taken home with me. I haven't looked at Dr. Sims. I don't know if has she completed. I don't know what. Oh, she's a candidate. I'm sorry. Lillian Sims' website is listed here. I'll have to check that out later. But yeah, there are some great examples out there you can look at. The other thing is, while you're hearing a talk, you can, comment to people on their talks. right? You may not always get a question in if there's too many people and questions, but you can, on your laptop or your computer, you can be writing people. I wrote someone during her talk, wow, this is really great. Here's what I like about this, is going well, because we were running short on time. And then follow up with people. If you only reach out to people when you want something, when you need something, that'll have an impact on your relationship with those folks. So try to just be collegial, whatever your stage and direction, right? What else? Once you've thought through these kinds of things, then relax and be yourself and act naturally. Most of all, and I really mean this, have fun with friends and the subject matter you love, right? This is what makes networking not work. It's net funning. You have fun with friends. When I go to conferences, I have a lot of fun with people that I like a lot and have met many times, right? So I mentioned that there's 2 titles to this talk. It's because we're getting to the second part here. There at conferences, there are going to be those people who are, in fact, I'm going to stop sharing and show you, right? Who'll be talking to you, and then they kind of frown a little bit, and they'll look elsewhere for other people who are more interesting, right? Who are going to benefit them more. Be careful about being that person. You can look around while you're talking to somebody and notice someone's there and go talk to them if you want, but be careful. I have many times had to unfortunately get bad impressions from people who really wanted to, be talking to someone more important than me, especially early on, and that carries over to someone, your impressions of someone's character. So as I say on the thingy here, there are people who approach us like Machiavelli. His, the insight I'm talking about in The Prince, he writes, well, this is a paraphrase, in contributing to another's greatness, the prince is himself undone, right? When you make someone else stronger or better off, you make yourself weaker, says Machiavelli. I think an educator takes a very different attitude, a good educator anyway, who isn't awful, thinks, I want to help people succeed. That's usually the hope, right? So be like the good educator, not a Machiavellian. Want others to be successful. What does that mean? That means you can nominate them for awards. You can offer to collaborate, and at the end of the day, what goes around comes around. So be good to your colleagues, and they'll want to be around you, right? One more proverb, and then we should open up for discussion about people's experiences. But, society grows great when old men, this is an old expression, plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. The networking version is, a person's network grows great when people advance their goals together, no matter who gets credit for it. So don't worry about, me so much as just being active and engaged with friends and colleagues in the field, and your network will grow and flourish quickly, I think. Now, all that said, the last point about acting naturally is important. There are limits about what it means to act naturally, especially for hiring committees. My colleagues know this, that there's certain information you don't ask candidates because it's frankly unfair to make judgments on that basis. So generally speaking, you don't even ask. There, in the American Philosophical Association, would meet at conference hotels, and small organizations, groups, and universities didn't get suites. They just had hotel rooms, and they struggled to find a place to meet. So a while ago, not that long ago, unfortunately, people would ask, hey, would you come up to the room to hold an interview? And seriously, the American Philosophical Association had hiring committees meet with young men and women sitting on a bed opposite someone else on a bed. You do not have to think that's acceptable. Oh, really? The American Economic Association too. Yeah, that is no longer usually happening. It's expressly, in fact, I don't know if forbidden is the right word, but it should be. Anyway, so there are things that you shouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with. You should allow yourself to say that. But also consider what you say being broadcast. Imagine someone is quoting you, 5 minutes later and types it into Twitter, right? Do you want what you say to be shared like that? If not, be careful what you say if you're speaking ill of an organization. That doesn't mean that you should lack conviction, however. Be who you are within reason. Just think about what it means for something to be on the cover of the newspaper tomorrow, right? Another inclination people have is, generally speaking, they don't want to be vain, and therefore I don't want to look like I'm bragging. But if you're writing, is communication and you don't disseminate it, haven't you failed to communicate it? So I guess my point is you try to find the balance between making sure your communications do what they're supposed to and avoiding vanity. That the point isn't vanity, but rather to engage others with your ideas. And that means read their stuff, get their ideas, seek their input on your projects, right? So if you don't sit on your work, put it out there, right? And in that process, you can also do something else really nice, which is to communicate, your thanks for the many contributions you've received from others, ideas, thoughts, support, anything. All those things are very useful, I think. And then concluding remarks, and then let's open it up to what are some awkward questions we've all been asked. Again, at the end of the day, make friends in your area of study and be a good friend to them in person and online. That means, on Twitter and Facebook and so on, when you're interested in someone's work, follow that and comment on it from time to time. You might think, oh, well, Diane Ravitch will never answer me. Well, Diane Ravitch appears to be pretty good friends with the dean of our college. So actually she's a famous person who might well answer you. Because she's probably more attentive to UK stuff than before the dean came. What else to say? We all know that networking can feel awkward. My suggestion is that it feels awkward much in the way that it can feel awkward to try and make friends. If you ask a kid, go make some friends. Well, they're awkward at first, right? So accept that, let that be the case, but realize the benefit in the end is you got some great friends all over the place, and it's a small world, but they're spread out, right? So last but not least, everyone starts with only 20 or 50 or 100 friends or followers or whatever. Don't let that kind of thing matter. It's time and engagement that grows these things. So let me stop for a minute and ask if there are any questions. That's sort of the substance of most of what I wanted to make sure to convey, but I also want to ask questions about things that you all are either worried about or what my colleagues want to make sure that you remember to prepare or think about when it comes to networking. And what are some doozies, some sort of surprising things that have come up in networking that would be useful for people to hear about? Not all at once, though. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Eric, a little bit earlier, you mentioned the situation where you're talking to someone at a conference and they're looking elsewhere, being very discourteous, and that is very troubling. However, keep in mind also that if you are engaging someone in conversation and you meeting them for the first time, create some kind of reasonable time to say what you wish to say, and then allow people to reasonably move on if they wish, so that you don't inadvertently just keep talking and whatever. So there's a
great point.
There's a bit of a minuet going on in that dance step.
Excellent point. Yeah, you want to leave people wanting more, right? So don't tire them out too much. Chris, go ahead.
Hey, how's it going? I wanted to just elaborate on something you said earlier, which I thought was a really good point, which is that when you're networking with people, you don't want to, when you see someone else who grabs your attention, you don't want to feel like you're blowing that new person off just to go talk to that other person who they might think you're just doing it because it's more important. This Eric's presentation here is about, developing, habits that, will make you be able to be more natural. And a good habit that's perfectly natural in that situation, that has to do with the heart of networking, build a bigger table. If you're talking to someone who you just met and you see somebody else you want to talk to, don't blow them off. Say, hey, come on over here and meet this person. Right? I mean, that builds your communication. As a matter of fact, it's why I'm here. I went to an APA meeting with John Shook, and we went over. He's like, hey, come have sushi with these other guys I'm going to meet. And I met Eric having sushi in Washington, and that's why I'm here today. And so I think it's just great advice to follow. And again, networking, it doesn't have to be Machiavellian or cold or underhanding. It's about building a bigger table, right? You know, and that's what it's all about, and developing the habits to do that. On that note, Eric, thank you for inviting me today as part of your networking. I have to
pleasure.
go. My lunch break is over. So everyone have a good day.
Thank you, Chris. And for what it's worth, Chris is involved in Sophia, right? In another part of the country. And partly it's from our networking, right? Wonderful.
There you go.
Mike also has a hand. Thank you, Chris.
Have a good one.
Yeah, I was actually also wanting to just also thank you for raising those points and kind of amplify that also for new people, which is what we just heard a little bit of also, that focusing on other people when you're networking is not just being polite, but it can be a really great way to get started. And I think sometimes that's what I want to emphasize to the people that are just getting out there for the first time, that that's one of the biggest problems a lot of new people to networking have is first, they don't want to just be self-promoting for a number of reasons. You know, that may be something they don't like doing from a philosophical standpoint. They don't want to be all self-promoting. They also may not be used to it or they may not be comfortable with it. But also another thing that happens when you're new, you don't have a lot to promote. So you're not going to be that person that they're looking for. You're going to be the person they want to get past. So focusing on promoting other people, who can you talk about that's in your other parts of your network? Who are your friends that are further along? Like, oh, I'm a first-year student. My good friend is graduating next term. What are they looking for? My favorite teacher is publishing a new book. Who do they want to hear about that? Focusing on these positive things is a great way to get started. So you don't feel artificial promoting yourself because you don't want to. And also so that you have great things to talk about, even your first day at a new association or conference.
I was muted. Piggybacking off what Mike said, I'm noticing Dr. Jensen's comment here. Conference conversations are like getting carded at the liquor store. Eventually they stop asking you what you did your dissertation on. That's true. So don't think this is forever. That's a good point. But when you are in a graduate program, you will be asked, oh, what are you studying? Right? Which can mean what's the program. It can also mean what's your dissertation, right? So you just want to be thinking about those kinds of things. Amy headed out. Yeah, we're getting close on time. Are there any other thoughts about kind of surprising questions? Let me give you some examples from job interviews, right? People will ask you things like, how do you contribute to diversity for this institution? And so I was a white man being interviewed at I'm just going to say an HBCU. I won't necessarily say which. And I answered the question to the best of my ability. And at the time I was offered that job. You don't have to think a question is an attack, right? Think about genuinely, how do you contribute to this thing? And there are contexts and questions for meetings where you'll get all these kinds of questions, and you can prepare your rough answer what you really think about it. You might think that it'll sound scripted, but the more it's what you think, the more you can just say it off the cuff.
Yeah, Eric, can I add one thing that's happened to a few of my students?
Sure, please.
I wish it had never happened, but it happens because people have heard me say this in class. People go to conferences for two reasons: to learn and to promote themselves. I'm totally convinced of that. And some people just want to listen to themselves the whole time. So if you have a poster up or you're doing a presentation, sometimes someone comes up and introduces themselves to you as the person that you forgot to include in your work that should be relevant and should be in their work. This happens a lot with poster presentations because you'll do some selected references and they basically will say, hi, I'm such and such. And I was just curious, this is the kind of work I do. And have you read any of my work? And so I think having a scripted comment to that is a really important thing as a student and a professional as well. Like, you don't want to be so thrown off on that. You want to be honest about what stage you're at in the research, because sometimes it's just because you're in an early stage of the research. And that's a real big opportunity, though, to make a connection you might have missed. If you handle it well, it could be the link into to a huge jump, right, in your research. But I've had that happen to a couple students before.
I think that's absolutely right. And the other, a flip side of that is, don't assume that people you and I might call famous within our field, which the public doesn't think is famous, but like big names, if you will, in your field, don't assume that they won't want to talk to you. You know, Elizabeth Anderson is the John Rawls and John Dewey professor at the University of Michigan and the chair of that department. Written some wonderful stuff I've drawn on, and she blurbed my Dewey book that's just come out, right? Like, you know, people can be super nice too. Not everybody is, but you know, you get to know a lot of different people. And if you haven't been referencing someone's work, yeah, you know, if you take it as an attack rather than as an opportunity, you'll get the wrong kind of a response, I think. Thanks so much, Shannon. I think Dr. Bradley is exactly right. You could sort of capitalize on that opportunity to express where you are in your projects and be there. What you're there to do in addition to presenting, I think Dr. Bradley put it exactly right, is you're there also to learn. And so the point of conferring is to get each other's ideas. So take that attitude and always be ready to say, oh my gosh, I didn't know about that. I really need to see that. Is that something you could at least give me the titles for? I can look them up, or could you share them? Whatever. And some of us are very excited to share our work with someone else who's getting into the area. So absolutely. Any other thoughts? It is a minute after now. And I like to try and stay to the time, but yes, of course, go ahead,
Very
Dr.
quick.
Thiemann.
A few years ago, I was at the Association for the Study of Higher Education conference. I had not been for 2 years. And I was really not having a great time. But between sessions, I had a tap on my shoulder, and it was Kayla Johnson. And I had not seen her in a few years. I knew in a vague way what she was doing, but in a very short conversation, it was just so good to talk to her, to catch up on her work. And so that's another source of communication and connection where you renew. And so the rest is history.
Niaz, who's here with us, has talked to me about enrolling in some EPE classes, right? And you know, teaches in Paducah. Absolutely, these are opportunities to network. I don't know if I'm going to say it right, but Yue Min Kin, if I said that correctly, you're a new student joining our department, right? And so absolutely, you know, networking works in student recruitment as well. So there's all kinds of reasons to do this. I hope you got something out of it. And I'd be happy to talk with any of you about this stuff if and when it, you know, comes up again for you, or you're interested in talking more. Again, you can connect with me in these places. You've got the URL for this document, which is at the very top. It was etw/.li. So that's my name, .link/networking. So you can get this document again if you want in the future. I'll also probably be posting this to YouTube, the video to YouTube and my website. So,
and Eric, you might
yeah.
want to remind people to follow the social media of the department. And also, if they're not
Yes.
on either our student listserv, we also have a Friends of EPE listserv, and they can email Dr. Jensen if they're not on either one of those.
Absolutely. So I've just put the Twitter account, and I can get the Facebook again. I was getting to have too many links. It was my problem, but I can put the link in right now very quickly. So
while you're working on that, I have one announcement. So on Wednesday at 2:30, I will be giving a talk through CARES about some of my visual collaborative work in Peru. So we're talking about methods and strategies and some of the lessons that I've learned, also with my research partner. So he'll be joining me as well.
Fantastic. And I'll be posting about that today. This is the link to our Facebook page. So the Twitter, I didn't put a link, but I can. Twitter.com/UK_EPE. There we go. So follow these things, connect with people. You know, you don't have to be constantly chattering, but occasionally, as you've got a paper that you could disseminate, share it with people, you know, let them know you're going to this conference, as Dr. Bradley brought up. All those things help people hear that you're going to be there too. Oh, okay, let's get lunch, you know, and we will be meeting again. Like my son's going to school, people, you know, I've gotten one shot of the vaccine, hopefully another soon. We're going to get back to normal, I hope, sometime in the next few months or a year. But a lot of this you can do in various ways online. So you have to make a bit more of an effort because you're not in the same place to go get a meal together, but you can try to make sure and get 15, 30 minutes with someone to have a chat on Zoom or something. So I want to be mindful of people's time. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate the thoughts and comments and questions, the ideas of organizations to consider joining and so forth. And be sure to follow EPE on social media. Thank you all so much, everybody, for coming. All right, take care.